And at 5:30 Eastern Time, a vote scheduled to move forward on an FDA user fee. It lets the agency collect fees to pay for its approval process on prescription drugs and medical devices. On the other side of the Capitol, the House is not in a legislative session today. They'll be in for a brief pro forma session, and they'll return to legislative business tomorrow. We're going to have live coverage for you now from the floor of the Senate right here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Eternal Spirit, we are overwhelmed by your majesty and grateful for your indescribable love. But we are also overwhelmed by our inadequacies, our failures, and our mistakes. Lord, forgive us for the misusing of the talents and abilities you have given us. Help us to cut through our preoccupation with ourselves and become more fully involved in fulfilling your purposes. Today, set the hearts of our senators upon new paths as they acknowledge that no true peace is possible outside of your will. Lord, guide them to produce creative legislation that will fulfill your will on earth. We pray in your sacred name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., June 25, 2012. To the Senate. On the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Christopher A. Coons, a senator from the state of Delaware, to perform the duties of the chair. Son Daniel K. Inouye, President Pro Tempore.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
We're now considering the motion to proceed to flood insurance. That's post-cloture. We'll begin consideration of that bill today. At 5:30, there will be a cloture vote on the motion to concur in the House message with respect to S. 3187, which is the Food and Drug Administration extremely important bill. Our work's been completed on that. We should be okay tonight and have that as something we can look to as having accomplished this week. We also need to complete work on student loans, flood insurance, and transportation this week. We have lots to do in a very short time to do it. Mr. President, today the Supreme Court correctly struck down the vast majority of the mean-spirited Arizona law. That's, of course, immigration law. And while I agree with the Court's decision to invalidate 3 troubling provisions of Arizona's flawed law, there were actually 4 provisions. 4 were declared unconstitutional, 1 was upheld. I really am concerned about the section they upheld that I'm surprised they did, but they did. The justice upheld a measure that allows police to conduct immigration checks on anyone they suspect of being in the country illegally, even if their only evidence is an accent or maybe the color of their skin. Allowing Arizona to keep its papers, please system of immigration checks fights racial profiling. And it gives Arizona officials free rein to detain anyone they suspect of being in Arizona without documentation. As long as this provision remains, innocent American citizens are in danger of being detained by police unless they carry immigration papers with them at all times. However, it's reassuring that the Court left the door open to further court challenge to this unsound provision. I just say to you, Mr. President, and to anyone with the sound of my voice, someone with my skin color or yours, I don't think you're going to be carrying your immigration papers with you every place you go. But if you're in Arizona and you speak with a little bit of an accent or your skin color is brown, you better have your papers with you. That's unfortunate. It's reassuring that the court, though, left the door open to further court challenges of this very unsound provision. I'm optimistic that once that portion of the law is implemented, it will be discarded. Laws that legalize discrimination are not compatible with laws and traditions of equal rights. So it's disturbing, Mr. President, that Mitt Romney has called the unconstitutional Arizona law. Sorry, Mr. President. So it's disturbing that Mitt Romney has called the unconstitutional Arizona law a model for immigration reform. Anyone who thinks such an unconstitutional law should serve as a model for national reform is clearly outside the mainstream, and the United States Supreme Court agreed with that today. Today's partial victory affirms the Obama administration was right to challenge this awful law, and it's a reminder that the ultimate responsibility for fixing our nation's broken immigration system rests with Congress. And instead of allowing 50 states to have 50 different enforcement mechanisms, we need a national solution that continues to secure the border, punishes unscrupulous employers who exploit immigrants and undercut American wages, improves our dysfunctional legal immigration system, and requires the 11 million people who are undocumented that they register with the government, pay fines and taxes, learn English, work, pay taxes, stay out of trouble, and go to the end of the line to legalize their status. Democrats are ready for this challenge, and we have been willing to craft a common-sense legal solution to this for a long time, one that's fair, tough, and practical. As I've indicated, Mr. President, we've been ready to do this for years. We've tried on a few occasions. The problem now and has been Republicans won't vote for immigration reform. Simple as that. We've tried. The first step would be to pass the DREAM Act, which would create a pathway to citizenship for children brought to the country through no fault of their own. If upstanding young people stay out of trouble and work hard in high school, they should have the chance to serve their country in the military, go to college, and work towards citizenship. Unfortunately, Mitt Romney has said he would veto that. It's the DREAM Act. President Obama, on the other hand, took decisive action in halting deportation of dreamers. His directive will protect 800,000 young people and focus law enforcement resources where they belong, on deporting criminals. As we all know, though, it's not a permanent solution. But President Obama's decision to defer these deportations was necessary precisely because Republicans have so far refused to work with Democrats on a solution. Congress must consider a long-term resolution to protect the dreamers and tackle comprehensive immigration reform that addresses all 11 million undocumented people living in this country. But that will take cooperation from our Republican colleagues, and that hasn't been forthcoming. Mr. President, this week we have a lot to accomplish. And getting it all done before the July 4th holiday will also take cooperation. By Friday, the Senate must pass flood insurance legislation that will allow millions of Americans to close on new homes or new properties. We must send to President Obama a bill to ease drug shortages. That's the FDA bill. We need to protect 3 million jobs with an agreement on transportation legislation. And the deadline to stop student loan rates from doubling for 7 million students looms at the end of this week as well. I'm putting my colleagues on notice, Mr. President, the Senate will stay as long as we have to, into the weekend if necessary, to complete this substantial workload. We hope that there will be cooperation, not only on this body, but also in the House of Representatives. I alert everyone, Mr. President, that we have a lot to do, extremely important pieces of legislation, and we've got to complete them before we leave here this week. What is the business today, Mr. President?
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved, and under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of the motion to proceed to S-1940, which the clerk will now report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 250, S-1940, a bill to amend the National Flood Insurance Act of 1968, and so forth, and for other purposes.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
And the U.S. Senate they are going to debate a bill that would continue the federal flood insurance program and move forward on that bill. And at 5:30 Eastern Time, a vote is scheduled to move forward on an FDA user fee. It lets the FDA collect fees to pay for its approval process on prescription drugs and medical devices. And just to let you know, on the other side of the Capitol, the House is not in a legislative session today. They had a brief pro forma session, and they'll return to legislative business tomorrow. And tonight, a discussion about Internet freedom abroad on the communicators with Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, Daniel Baer. We're going to have that tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern Time here on C-SPAN 2. And a look at Washington Journal Wednesday. It continues its Spotlight on Magazine series with a former president of Bank of America, Sally Krawcheck. She wrote an article for Harvard Business Review on how to improve the banking industry. And you can find a link to the article at our webpage, cspan.org. And we'll talk with her live Wednesday morning at 9:15 Eastern. That'll be on our companion network, C-SPAN.
Zayat.
quorum be suspended.
Without objection.
Mr. President, since the victory of the socialist candidate for the President of France, opponents of fiscal responsibility have found renewed vigor for pro-spending ideology, more stimulus, as we might recall it here in this country. And there's interest in this country also, maybe, in more fiscal stimulus. The new French president talked about choosing growth over austerity. Many liberal pundits and politicians on this side of the Atlantic have now begun to echo this call. When you put it that way, it barely sounds like a choice at all. The term austerity sounds so severe, but almost everybody agrees that economic growth is good. Just what is this austerity all about? In Europe, austerity is often used to describe an attempt to reduce budget deficits by reining in unsustainable spending. In this country, we more often talk about fiscal responsibility. For Europeans who have grown accustomed to generous social benefits, even modest reforms to government programs are apparently cause to take to the streets, demonstrate. But for the millions of Americans who still believe in limited government and who do not feel entitled to programs or benefits paid for by the earnings of others, there's nothing austere about government spending within its means. So then what about the other aspect of it, growth? The implication of the supposed choice between growth and austerity is that we must accept irresponsible levels of spending in order to have that economic growth. Obviously, this is absurd, but political convenient economic theory was summed up by Margaret Thatcher as, quote, "The more you spend, the richer you get." That doesn't meet the common sense test in the Midwest of America. It was the rationale behind President Obama's massive $800 billion stimulus bill. The bill looked suspiciously like a grab bag of pent-up Democrat spending priorities, but we were told that all of this spending was necessary to keep unemployment below 8%. Of course, as we all know, unemployment soon soared well above 8%, and it has never dipped below 8% now 3 years later. I would say to all of those across the Atlantic in Europe calling for new stimulus spending, we tried it, and it didn't work. Not only didn't it work, but it made things worse. All of that government spending crowded out private sector activity that would have helped the recovery and settled our economy and our children with even more debt. Conversely, reining in government spending will unleash the power of free enterprise to create wealth and grow our economy in ways that no government central planner can ever accomplish. Despite the clear results of the most recent American experience with stimulus spending, liberal pundits are now blaming Europe's current economic troubles on efforts to reduce government spending. They say that savage cuts by pro-austerity governments in countries like Britain, France, and Spain have actually damaged their economies. So just how deep did these countries of Europe actually cut? Spain increased spending after the recession started, then implemented some modest cuts, but is still spending more than it did before the recession. Britain and France have continued to increase spending. So much, then, for savage spending cuts. It defies common sense, but as you know, in this town, smaller increases in spending than previously planned can qualify somehow as a cut in spending. However, to most Americans, cutting spending actually means spending less than you were the year before. The fact that there have been no serious spending cuts in these supposedly pro-austerity countries is enough to dismiss the accusations that spending cuts are the cause of Europe's current troubles. But there's another part of the story that is too often ignored. Government that talk about the need to reduce deficits but are too timid to enact necessary spending cuts invariably turn to tax increases. For instance, since the recession started, Britain has raised the top marginal income tax rate, as well as increasing capital gains tax, the national insurance tax, and the value-added tax. Spain has enacted hikes in personal income tax and property taxes and seems to be planning even more taxes. This year, the Spanish government is looking to address its deficit with a $19.2 billion package of spending reductions paired with another $16 billion worth of tax increases. Of course, to us here in the United States, that sounds a lot like what Democrats have been calling a balanced approach. And so it is. Just like giving a patient an equal dose of medicine and poison would be a balanced approach. However, across Europe, there's been a lot more emphasis on the poison of tax increases than on the medicine of spending cuts. In fact, while government spending across the entire European Union fell by just 2.6 billion euros between 2010 and 2011, taxes rose by a staggering 235 billion euros. So, while critics of austerity are flat out wrong to blame the large mythical spending cuts for Europe's economic troubles, they may have stumbled on to something. To the extent that austerity really means big tax increases rather than serious spending cuts, I think it identifies a big part of Europe's fiscal and economic problems. These facts notwithstanding, if I couldn't point to an example where economic growth resulted from spending restraint, my arguments would ring hollow. I would sound like those radical intellectuals who still refuse to accept that Marxism has been totally discredited both morally and economically by claiming that it has never truly been tried. However, what I'm talking about has been tried. There are plenty of examples where bold leadership to dramatically rein in government spending has resulted in economic growth. There's actually a prime example right in Europe and in the Euro area, Estonia. In response to the 2008 economic crisis, Estonia's free enterprise-oriented government focused on real spending cuts, including major structural reforms. Estonia cut private sector wages, raised the pension age, and reformed health benefits. When it comes to taxes, Estonia already had a low flat tax and didn't raise rates. While there was an increase in the value-added tax, the overwhelming emphasis was on spending cuts. As a result, the Estonian economy grew at 7.6% last year. And it happens that Estonia is the only country in the Eurozone with an actual budget surplus, and the country has a national debt that is only 6% of GDP. Now, can you imagine that? A debt of only 6% GDP. Moreover, Estonia had an especially deep hole to climb out of. The Estonian economy was devastated by global financial crisis. It contracted by 18%, which is more than Greece has. Nevertheless, Estonia's economy is well on the way back to pre-recession levels. I should add that in response to the spending cuts, Estonians didn't riot in the streets. Instead, they re-elected their government. Also, while Estonia is the most impressive example, a similar story also holds true for other Baltic countries like Latvia and Lithuania. Perhaps their unhappy experience of Soviet domination has made them quite extra skeptical of big government solutions to problems. It's possible that the unique history of the Baltic countries makes it easier for them to break the spending addiction, but that doesn't mean that it can't be done here. In fact, I'll give you an example that is much closer to home, Canada. In the 1990s, Canada was facing the same problem the United States is now. It suffered a recession, had a looming debt crisis. The Canadian government's response was to dramatically cut spending. Again, I'm not talking about slowing the rate of growth, but actual spending cuts. In just 2 years, starting in 1995, total non-interest spending fell 10%. Canadian federal spending as a share of GDP dropped from 22% in 1995 to 15% 11 years later. Canada's federal debt was at 68% of GDP in 1995, and it's down to just 34% today. Now, a lesson for America, compare that to our national debt, which is more than 70% of GDP. Like Estonia, the overwhelming emphasis in Canada was on spending cuts rather than tax increases. Moreover, these cuts included structural reforms. Canada's government fixed its version of Social Security, which is the third rail of American politics, as we say here. Unlike Social Security, the Canadian pension plan is solvent for the foreseeable future. Now, what's really interesting is that these reforms were not implemented by some right-wing ideologues. These reforms, all implemented by the Canadian Liberal Party, which is a center-left party, like America's Democrats. However, when President Bush suggested fixing Social Security upon his re-election, the issue was relentlessly demagogued by Democrats in Congress. More recently, when Paul Ryan unveiled a plan to save Medicare, rather than present alternative ideas, liberal groups depicted him in political advertisements pushing grandmother off of a cliff. If our Democrats had shown the same leadership the Canadian Liberals did, we would be in a lot better economic shape right now. Instead, what we get from the other side of the aisle is demands for more stimulus spending and head-in-the-sand denial about the impending bankruptcy of Medicare and Social Security. There are a lot of other examples where low taxes and spending restraint have led an economic recovery after a downturn. In fact, a 2009 paper by two Harvard economists, Alberto Alicia and Sylvia Ardenia, reviewed 107 examples of fiscal adjustments in industrialized countries between 1970 and the year 2007. They found that statistically, tax cuts are more likely to increase growth than spending. They also found that spending cuts without tax increases are more likely to reduce deficits and debt than increase taxes. The historical record is clear. We know what path leads to economic growth and prosperity. However, that is not an easy path to follow. Unlike the have your cake and eat it too philosophy, that says more government spending will somehow make us all richer, the real road to recovery requires real leadership and less spending. Earlier in my comments, I mentioned a statement by Margaret Thatcher's contempt for stimulus ideology. When she took office, Britain was in deep debt and known as the sick man of Europe. In fact, Britain had been forced to go to the IMF for a bailout and was regularly rocked by massive strikes. In many ways, it was the Greece of the 1970s. When Thatcher began making the difficult decisions necessary to reduce and rescue the British economy, many people, including some of her own party, pleaded for her to return to the big spending policies of previous British governments. Her response is applicable to our country today as it was to Britain back then. And I'd like to quote Margaret Thatcher, and I'll end with this quote. "If spending money like water was the answer to our country's problems, we would have no problems now. If ever a nation had spent, and spent again, ours has. Today, that dream is over. All of that money has got us nowhere, but it still has to come from somewhere. Those who urge us to relax the squeeze, to spend yet more money indiscriminately, in the belief that it will help the unemployed and the small businessman, are not being kind or compassionate or caring. They are not the friends of the unemployed or the small business. They are asking us to do again the very thing that caused the problem in the first place." End of Thatcher quote. Now, I'll leave with this proposition. Can Congress learn from the experiences of Estonia, Canada, and Britain's Thatcher? If we can turn this U.S. economy around. And the economy and jobs is the issue of this presidential campaign season. Mr. President, let me ask somebody if they can shake their head. Is there anybody else waiting to get the floor? Because I'd like to take another 3 minutes, if I could, on another issue. Mr. President, I would ask that my remarks that I'm going to make now be placed in the record where we do the debate on the FDA bill.
Without objection.
Mr. President, 2 years ago, a constituent of mine named